Bourgeois is a hematologist and medical oncologist at Baystate Health. She is also the Associate Program Director of the Hematology Oncology Fellowship Program at UMass Chan Baystate and the Medical Director of the Family Cancer Risk Program at Baystate Health. She completed medical school in India, followed by an internal medicine residency and hematology oncology fellowship at Baystate Medical Center, an affiliate of the University of Massachusetts Chan Medical School. She is interested in hereditary and familial cancer syndromes and predominantly focuses her practice on seeing patients with breast cancer through the continuum, all the way from diagnosis and treatment to survivorship. Welcome. And last but certainly not least is Dr. Eduardo Nunez, MD, MS. He is a pulmonary and critical care physician at Baystate Health and a health services researcher in the Department of Healthcare Delivery and Population Sciences at University of Massachusetts, Baystate. He completed medical school at the University of Pittsburgh, residency in internal medicine at Brown University, and completed pulmonary and critical care medicine fellowship at Boston University and Boston Medical Center. His research interests include addressing disparities in lung cancer screening to improve mortality from lung cancer overall and among underserved populations. He also has interest in improving communication with patients through shared decision-making in lung cancer screening and in end-of-life conversations. Dr. Nunez's efforts to address barriers to accessing screening and the health of underserved populations have been recognized through several awards, including the American Thoracic Society Underrepresented Trainee Development Scholarship and ATS, the American Thoracic Society Behavioral Sciences and Health Sciences Research Abstract Scholarships. Dr. Nunez has also received grant funding from the National Institutes of Health and Longevity Foundation. Thank you. And at this time, our moderator will take over.
Thank you, Timothy. So we're going to jump right in. So Robin, thank you both to you and William for being here. I'm going to ask you about survivorship. So that's a different part of a cancer journey, and what does it mean to you, and how do you interact differently in the world as you navigate health, like other aspects of your health, being a cancer survivor?
Good gravy. Well, first of all, I've always known that God had my back, so I've always known that. And so when I was first diagnosed, I was a little bit afraid, but I never thought about, oh, I'm going to die. I never thought about that. I thought about, how am I going to get out of this? That's what I thought. Because I said, oh, this is nonsense to begin with, because I didn't believe it, because, I don't get cancer. I'm not one of those people who would get cancer. But how I look at the world differently, to be quite frank with you, I feel like I'm able now to speak on things that I was not able to speak on before. Like when someone said they had cancer, all I could say was, oh, I'm so sorry. But now I can say, girl, don't worry about it. You got this, okay? It's all good. I have lived a relatively blessed, an incredibly blessed, relatively charmed life. And I never had really any issues that I can speak to. And so this was a big deal for me. And I was like, you know what? I guess my time. Everyone has to have a little rainfall. So this was my rain. And if this is the worst that happened to me, so be it, because I'm still here.
So William, everyone's cancer journey is different. Can you describe a specific challenge you had, maybe either during treatment or when you got diagnosed, and just how you navigated it?
Well, as you said, I myself thought it was a death sentence because I didn't know how to take it. I had a daughter who passed on from cancer. I had a brother who passed on from cancer. when I found that I had it, I was about to lose my mind. I didn't know who to turn to. The only person I could turn to, I gave honor to God. God brought me through. My faith in Jesus brought me through this. And then, my lovely wife. My lovely wife for, God knows, 44 years. I hope I'm getting it right, honey. You know? But with all of that, the cancer, TBI, traumatic brain injury, the explosion, and things of that nature, I had to have faith. And faith was the only thing that brought me through. Had I not had faith, I think I would have fell down by the wayside. You know, my wife brought me to Solid Rock. Because I was in another church, New Jerusalem, I wasn't learning. She said, let's go to this church. I said, okay. So they began to teach me. So from that day on, I've been in church for 30 years. From that day on, I devoted myself to God, along with the beautiful wife that I have for 44 years. But faith brought me through this cancer. I first thought it was a death cancer sentence. Then when they did the surgery, it lasted 17 hours. I went into a coma, and when they woke me up out of the coma, the first thing I said, oh, thank you, Jesus. And the doctor looked at me and said, because then again, the doctor was Muslim. He didn't understand what I was going through. He didn't know who Jesus was. I said, thank you, Jesus. The doctor says, you can go to your room now. I said, thank you. He said he'd never seen nothing like that before, how a person just come out of 17 hours of surgery, you know. And I just went to my room, and then a couple of days later, I went home to my beautiful wife, and she took care of me. She's been taking care of me ever since. And so, faith. Just don't give up. That's the whole thing.
I will let you guys think about this one, and anyone can jump in. But if there's one piece of advice that you could offer others who are diagnosed with cancer, what would that be?
First of all, surround yourselves with the people that love you and the people who you love. Because I'm going to tell you honestly, it is through God that people are placed in your life. And you need to say thank you and need to understand and appreciate those individuals. And I can remember being on the phone just before Thanksgiving, and I was on the phone talking to the doctor, and I said, cancer? And then my daughter, her ears popped up, and she ran to her phone, and she started looking up stuff, and she started watching. Then my husband, he took my hand and said, it's all right, baby, we're going to be fine. We're going to get through this. And as I said, it wasn't just my immediate family, but my sisters, my sister friends, and my church family. They were so there for me. They brought food to the hospital for my family when they were all there. My sisters came from Florida and Maryland, and they stayed in the hospital the entire surgery, and it was over 14 hours. And they stayed and they waited until they saw that I was okay. So surround yourself with the people that love you, love them back, and don't forget to say thank you to the people who are taking care of you in the hospital, because you think to yourself, oh my goodness, you know, I'm going through this, I'm going through that. These nurses and doctors, every day they see pain and suffering. And sometimes we take it for granted that, oh, you're supposed to, this is your job. Say thank you. Let them know you appreciate the fact that they're there. So thank you.
You want to know how I got over, how I got through this? I really, like I said at the beginning, I thought this was a death sentence because of what I've seen happen. I've seen a lot of things happen in the hospital, in the cancer hospital. I began to cry. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm serious. As a man, I just gave up. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I got holes in my chest when he gave surgery to me. You know, I got all kinds of stuff going on in there, and when it was all said and done, I had one person behind me that had my back, my wife. I can't talk enough about her being there for me. When you have somebody on your back that takes care of you 100%, that understands, I was a plain knucklehead. I'm going to tell you, I was hard to get along with. I said, oh, this is a death sentence. They ain't going to do nothing for me. I'm going to die with cancer like everybody else. I just give up. My wife said, no, you're not going to give up. I'm not going to allow you to give up. So she continued to hold on to me and bring me to the Lord. Had not been for my wife and the Lord, I don't think I would be here. I think I would have gave up, you know. not on. Hello. But like I said, cancer is not a death sentence. It's just something you just got to go through life and just keep on pushing. You know, no matter what people say to you, people say, "Oh, you got cancer, you're gonna die. You got all this going on with you. I feel sorry for you. Oh, I'm so sorry you got cancer." Not that. You're gonna be all right. You know, just hold on in there. Have faith. Think positive, and you'll be all right. I thank God that I'm still here. I've been cancer-free for 5 years. Thank God. You know, 5 years, and I'm doing excellent. And I want to give a thanks to one of my good friends, Denise. I love you. Thank you.
I think what I'm hearing, and I hear it in practice, is that cancer really doesn't happen to the individual, right? It happens to our village. And so we just have to give space for the village to grieve, but also to surround us and to build us up. And I frequently will ask people, you know, who is your person, right? When they come in, because everyone has that person that they want to be the first they tell the news to, or that the first tear is shed in front of. And so thank you to all the families. Thank you for all, you know, the persons, because as physicians, we also need you, right? We need you to tell us, to advocate. And so thank you. So we're gonna do a little education now because, again, cancer is unexpected. It's an unwelcome visitor, and we need to be vigilant. So let's start with breast cancer. So you know, mammograms are, we all know we should get them done. We don't always know when we should start. We don't know when we should stop. And so can you just give us a little bit of direction, and then we'll talk a little bit about MRI.
In terms of screening mammograms, there are various societies that have come up with different guidelines, but in general, the recommendation is for somebody who has an average risk of developing cancer to consider mammograms between the ages of 40 to 49, but certainly do screening starting the age of 50. However, if you have additional risk factors like a strong family history, or you have additional risk factors that increases your risk of breast cancer, the recommendation is to start screening mammograms at the age of 40. I must add that the US PS task force that really kind of guides a lot of physician communities to start screening mammograms is at this point of time considering changing, making it more uniform to start screening mammograms, potentially starting the age of 40 for all women. But I would highly encourage that you have this discussion with your primary care physicians, primary care providers, or your gynecologists, if they're the ones who are going to be ordering mammograms for you, to identify when is the right time to start this. Because there are certain individuals who would benefit from starting screening even earlier than that, but not for everyone. And so that is why it's really important for you to have this conversation with your PCPs.
How is the MRI different than a mammogram?
Yeah, so we get asked this question quite often. So MRI is a much more sophisticated test compared to a mammogram, but that also means that it comes with a lot of false positives, meaning it's so sensitive that it picks up a lot of things. It can also pick up noise, which can, be anxiety provoking for a lot of people. So routinely, we don't recommend doing MRI screening for breast cancer detection unless we think that your risk of developing breast cancer is so high that identifying those noises and making sure that that's not breast cancer is also very important. So who are the people who we typically recommend an MRI for? It's people who may have, genes like the BRCA genes that runs in their family. It's possible that, people who've received radiation in the past to the chest area, are at a higher risk of developing breast cancer. So those are people who should consider an MRI. We often get asked, I have been told I have dense breasts, should I consider getting an MRI done? So we have various models that we use that estimates what is a woman's lifetime risk of developing breast cancer. Now, these are not perfect models, which is why it's really, again, important to have this conversation with, the provider that you're seeing. And if somebody is deemed to have a high enough risk of developing breast cancer, then an MRI of the breast may be considered for screening.
Got in trouble for pushing buttons. Okay. So, so we're on the idea of screening, right? The idea of a screening test is that we want to identify those people who are at highest risk. So screening is really for everyone. So lung cancer, how does screening work for lung cancer?
Yeah, thank you. And first I'll say that lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer-related death in the US and in the world. Heart disease is the first leading cause of death, and then right after that is cancer, with lung cancer having the highest mortality. And so it's important to not only how do we prevent lung cancer, but also how do we catch it at an early and treatable stage so that people can live, normal, healthy lives, even though, we caught it early, even though they had a diagnosis of lung cancer. So for about 10 years now, we have a screening test for lung cancer. It's a low-dose CAT scan of the chest, and it's right now, it's recommended and covered by insurance for individuals who have a smoking history. So usually having smoked 20 years or more. And that's part of the reason that a lot of people don't know about it. It's not like mammography or colonoscopy that everyone, between the age of 40 or 50 to 75 should get one. So it's a little bit, it has to have a smoking history. But I would also add that if you have things like family history, or you've worked with things like asbestos or silica, other things that put you at risk, to also talk to your doctor, because those work exposures put you at risk for lung cancer as well. So it's important to catch it at an early and treatable stage.
What if you live with a smoker?
Yeah, so secondhand smoke definitely can increase your risk of lung cancer. And so I think it's important to, talk about smoking cessation with your partner, but also talk about with your doctor, like, what can I do to get screened? And, can we get a low-dose CT to look for lung cancer early?
Okay. Both of you talked about things that increase our risk for lung and breast cancer. Can you just elaborate? So we know family history is important. It is super important for us to tell our stories. I don't know how many times I've heard, Grandma died from cancer, but she wouldn't talk about it. I'm like, when she's giving you the recipe for the jambalaya, you need to be like, and what did your mother die of? Like, and sometimes we figure out, did she have a bag? Did she have bleeding before? Like, we need to tell the stories because they have generational impact. We use a lot of the information that you tell us to decide who should get screened, who should have genetic testing. And unfortunately, now we use the cancer diagnosis as the reason to get testing. But that feels like we're late, right? Could we have prevented a cancer had we looked before? So can both of you talk a little bit about what are those risk factors? What are those family histories that are important? Like, is it my third cousin that matters, or is it just my sister that matters?
So I'll start off by talking specifically about risk factors related to family history. So with regards to family history and breast cancer, anybody in the family, first-degree relative, which is either mom or could even be dad, because breast cancer can be seen in men as well, although rare, or siblings. If they've been diagnosed with breast cancer below the age of 50, that by itself is a consideration for genetic testing for an individual. Or if you have 2 generations of breast cancer history, that may be a reason to consider genetic testing. So in terms of family history, everything matters. Your immediate family members, distant family members, So it's really important for you to collect as much information as possible and let your doctors know so that we can make sure that you're getting all the right care that you need. In addition to that, other risks, since you were alluding to that, I'll talk a little bit about additional risks for breast cancer in addition to just family history alone. Obesity is certainly a risk factor for developing breast cancer, so it's really important. Often you'll be counseled about weight management. Other risk factors include if you've received previous radiation, that's a risk factor. Alcohol consumption is a risk factor for breast cancer. You do have additional factors related to hormonal levels, like, when did you have your first child? Or, how many children you've had? Did you breastfeed your children? Did you receive any sort of, hormonal birth control? Or did you receive hormonal replacement treatment after menopause? All of these things are important information for us because these can, certainly impact your risk of developing breast cancer.
Yeah, I'll talk about lung cancer. So smoking is responsible for 80% of lung cancers, but not every lung cancer is related to smoking. So there is a family history component. I also want to touch base, you brought up the important point that sometimes it doesn't get talked about. And that's particularly relevant in lung cancer and smoking because there's such a strong stigma associated with smoking. If you know someone that got diagnosed with lung cancer, if a friend is telling you, my neighbor got diagnosed with lung cancer, the next question everyone asks is like, oh, did they smoke? And it's not bad, and it's not bad intention. We don't mean harm by it. But I think for patients interpreting that, they kind of process that as like, well, did I have control over this? Like, people feel like I had control over this because I knew it could give me lung cancer. When the reality is that the tobacco companies are putting very addictive substances in there that make it extremely hard to quit. And it's targeted towards certain individuals and populations. So it's not really their fault. And we need to give them as much support and help as possible and fight the stigma that there is with not admitting to people that you smoke and not admitting to people that you have lung cancer, because everyone thinks it's, like you said, a death sentence. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that it's not. And so we need more survivors and people coming out saying, I had lung cancer. I'm doing well, I'm doing strong, because it's important for other people to not stay silent or in fear that they don't want to get checked because they're afraid they might have something because they smoke, and they feel bad about, shame that they brought that upon themselves when that's not the truth at all.
So I'm thinking about breast cancer again for a moment. Breast self-exams. So I'm a gynecologist, so belly button down. And women are like, I do my breast self-exams. What do you think about it? And I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think about it.
Breast examination is certainly, I would recommend it. However, I think it's really important to know that just because you do a self-breast exam and you don't feel anything, that it's okay to skip a mammogram, because you don't necessarily feel things until it grows up to a certain size. And the whole point of a mammogram is to be able to identify it even earlier when it's even smaller than that and not really palpable a lot of the times. So if you look at it, society's guidelines say, they don't necessarily recommend self-breast examinations in general. However, my philosophy towards it is, I think it's important for you to check yourself and see if there is something going on wrong that is unusual for you. However, a normal exam does not mean that you can skip a mammogram.
That's good. That's good advice. No, and that's what I will tell my patients from now on. So just thinking about fear, and there's fear on both sides, right? So as we're going to these tests, there is that fear that the result will not be good. And so we just have to actively manage that when we decide to do a screening test, we're accepting all the possible outcomes. And I always tell people, you should take the test understanding that you can get any outcome, but know that there is a solution for any of those outcomes. And so, the physician is really joining your team. And you have to make sure that you have that dialogue about what you're most scared of. We've all been given a patient a diagnosis, and you both have received a diagnosis, and there's this pause. There's this space that gets created when the word cancer is uttered. And, as I've gotten older, and I'm very old, I have begun to acknowledge that space, right? Because the physician inside has so much. I want to make it better for you right after I say the word cancer, but I realize that we have to just acknowledge that something huge, like we've just driven a Mack truck through your living room, and so give space. And then the thing that I've started to ask, and you can, the energy in the room, sometimes people just want to know what's next. But I've begun to ask, and it scares me too, what are you most scared of? Right? I take care of women. So some will be saying, my children, telling my mother, telling my husband, I don't want to die, right? And so giving space to those things, but the biggest advocate for you will always be you. You know your life best. You know what's most important to you. You know the thing that you're fighting for. So just remember that getting that screening test is you advocating for yourself. It's getting you more information. So I think those things are important. Are there other things that the doctors want to share about your cancer? So smoking cessation, right? Mm-hmm. So smoking is another one of the many addictions of our society, right? We're addicted to food, Netflix. Some things are more harmful to us than others. And smoking cessation is tricky. So what I've typically told people, and please correct me, is that it typically takes 8 times before you're successful. So every time you sort of, you fail and you smoke again, like it's okay, right? It's one try under your belt. You're getting closer to success. But there are addictive things in there. They're chemicals. It's not a weakness of state. There's a physical component to it. So can you talk a little bit about what are the strategies for smoking cessation?
Yeah, I think, like you said, the first thing is to not be hard on yourself. Life is hard enough. You don't need to be, just because you didn't make the first attempt or the second, you don't need to be extra hard on yourself for that. I think the therapy for smoking cessation has gotten a lot better, and how we counsel patients has gotten a lot better. So now what we're telling patients is a combination of the patch and usually an oral medication like Chantix. And I think the most important thing that I tell patients that is the biggest myth around the patch is that people think that they can't smoke and be on the patch at the same time. When in reality, if every time you smoke a cigarette you take off the patch, you're going to have more harm from the keeping smoking cigarettes than you are from keeping the patch on while you smoke. So really forming that habit of every day using the patch, and then just start, picking one cigarette at a time from your daily life that you're like, I don't need this cigarette anymore. And for those of you who know Doris Harris, this is her approach, how she talks to people. And sure enough, Doris will get, I think, almost all her patients to quit smoking. So.
All right, awesome. So another thing, I was hoping to learn about this, and maybe not in this forum, but let's do it now. Vaping and e-cigarettes. Right? Again, as an older person, I there seems to be this energy like it's not really cigarettes, it's not, but can you just shed some light on that and then the cancer risks associated with it?
Yeah, so e-cigarettes, you might have seen like the Juul. They come in all sorts of colors and flavors, and they taste like candy, and they're marketed towards younger people. The nicotine that's in one of those pods is the same amount of nicotine that's in a pack of cigarettes. Yeah, so it can be very addicting, and especially targeted towards younger individuals or people going away from home. That's more stressful scenario. You can see how it's very easy to pick up that habit, and we do know that it can cause lung injury. So we have a lot of people come in with all of a sudden difficulty breathing and breathing problems when they didn't have any. And just like tobacco with cigarettes, we don't know what the long term. It took 20, 30 years to really start seeing lung cancer pick up, and then we realized it was from smoking. We don't know from e-cigarettes, but so we still need time, but I think it's anything that you're breathing in that's a chemical, you don't know what damage it's causing to your body.
How did this is for our survivors, how did your medical teams sort of build rapport for you to move ahead with care? Because there are times when people are turned off by the health system or an interaction. So was there something that your team did well, or if there was something that they didn't do well? Because ultimately you went through with care. And so I think those are important stories for people to hear.
The care that I got, I'm going to tell you, it wasn't all that great. It almost made me want to walk out the hospital because they didn't explain to me what they were going to do. They didn't explain to me what the cancer was, nothing to that nature. I smoked for a little while, and I quit. But then I went to Iraq. They had what was called the burn pits, where they burn humans, animals, oil, car parts, anything they can burn, you breathe it in. So when I came home from Iraq, I had a hard time breathing. I went to the hospital, and they found sand in my lungs. And the sand was just like burning and itching inside. It was hurting so bad, So when they did the surgery, they didn't really say too much to me, They did the surgery and just dropped me like a hot rock. No aftercare, none of that. My wife looked it up. She started taking care of me. She went back to the caregivers at the hospital and told them, this is not right what you're doing to my husband. So with her voice speaking up for me, I got all the care that I needed, That's why I tell you guys, I say, I have to look towards my wife for everything. I mean, it may sound sensitive sometimes, but I need my better half, I can't do this by myself. I refuse to, When you have somebody that cares for you and helping you go through this cancer thing, I seriously thought that I was going to die. Because when I came through, I had all these tubes in my side, needles stuffed down my throat everywhere. So what is all of this? I couldn't move. And I couldn't wait till they took all this stuff off me. I mean, I had things everywhere. Everywhere. This was something new to me, and I just had to keep on praying. I kept on praying. My wife kept praying with me. My baby daughter kept praying with me. These are the people that give you strength, your family. If you don't have family, you don't have nobody to give you the strength to give you that aftercare that you need, then you're really going to fall down by the wayside. It's the aftercare that matters. It's not before, it's after. Because when you don't have anybody beforehand, even after you go through all this surgery, all these stitches in my body, I couldn't stand it. Now, up until today, I still won't walk around without a shirt because of all those stitches in me. But faith brought me through. All the doctors I had 21 or 22 doctors, the team, and they did this and did that. And after they finished doing that, I woke up in there and said, what? Nobody's going to talk to me about what they did to me? I had read it. My wife read it. I had what they call small lung cancer, I've been cancer-free for 5 years now. I'm so blessed, It feels really great. So when I see people smoking a cigarette or doing something like that, hey, I have cancer? They said, huh? I said, yeah, and it's going to kill you. They said, what? Yeah, it's going to kill you. I watched a guy take a whole pack of cigarettes, do like that. I said, that's the best thing you did for the rest of your life. Excuse me. And that was it for me. You know, the aftercare that I had, like I said, was from my wife, not from the doctors. I was really distraught.
My situation was totally different because, like you said, your family was behind you. My family was behind me, next to me, around me, the whole 9 yards. And I'm the type of person, I don't take no for an answer very easily. So I asked questions, and I have to tell you, my team was on point because they welcomed the questions and they answered every last one of them. My biggest challenge was the fact that I wanted to have a double mastectomy because it was my second time. And I said, I'm old. You think you're old. I'm old as dirt, baby. So, and I said, I don't want to do this again in another 9 years because the first 9, and then I thought I was good. I was golden. And then it came up again, and it was in the other breast, and it was a different type of cancer. And I was like, I don't want to do this again. And so I asked my doctor if it was possible to have the double. And he said, well, we'll see what the insurance says. And I said, God, you're going to make sure the insurance is going to do it, right? And lo and behold, he took care of it because my doctors were on point, and they said, I'm going to write it up, and the insurance company's going to pay for all of it. And they did. And they paid for from the removal. I mean, I did an Angelina Jolie because I was like, I wasn't going to do this again. And so I said, and so from the removal to the rebuilding, they took me through every single step, and I asked questions, and they were more than happy to answer it. And it was right here at Baystate, and I'm going to tell you, they were wonderful, and I was blessed. I really am, you know. So ask the questions, and I think as people of color, and going from what my grandmother died of cancer, and they said it was lung cancer. I believe it was breast cancer that metastasized into lung cancer, because, you know, back in the day, they didn't know, and women of color, they didn't ask questions, and they weren't supposed to, because they were like, you know, the doctor knows, and the like. So I believe that's what happened. So at this point, I tell everybody, ask questions, and don't settle for, we'll let you know. Just keep on asking, you know, because they have to tell you, your life is in their hands, but you're still responsible for your own.
I'm just going to make a comment here. You know, in my practice, I've noticed that people of color generally tend to ask lesser questions. So it's really important for you to bring a friend, bring a family member. You know, there are a lot of people who, you know, live by themselves, may not necessarily have family members around. Bring at least a friend around, you know, along with you for your visits. Because when you are initially seeing a medical oncologist or a surgical oncologist, a doctor who's giving you information about cancer, you're not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to process any of that information. So I think it's really, really important to bring a friend or a family member who can ask you the questions, who can ask your doctor the questions on your behalf, because, you know, they're probably going to be able to process that information better.
I was also going to add, I learned this from Dr. Myers last year, but whenever we get any sort of test done in the medical fields, there's a saying that people will tell to themselves, good news, no news is good news. And that means that if you don't hear from the doctor, everything is good. But that's not true. You paid for that test. You went to get that test done. You need to get the results of that test, because you went through all that to get that test. I know there's a lot of work in healthcare, but it's, you know, you went through that work, so we need to go through that work for you as well.
This is a total bad analogy. I probably won't say this next year, but it's like buying a scratch ticket and not scratching it. Because, like, statistically, it's a loser, right? Don't make any assumptions. The other thing is know what is being done. So one of the top 5 things I hear is, you can give me the report, but I won't understand what it says. That's my job. That's what your copay's about. I'm supposed to, you bring your highlighter, your underline, you circle all the words, you Google it, and anything that you don't get, that's my job to make sure you get it. So, you know, pap smear being normal, there's actually like 10 words that say that, but it's not going to be in English. And so it's my job so that you understand it. And it's the same with the mammogram. You know, I just had my mammogram, and it said dense breasts, and I was like, ugh, and it was like 9,000 words, and I called, and I'm like, and I kind of know about dense breasts. Breasts are not my thing. And I tell my husband, I was like, they sent me this long letter. I was like, regular people can't even understand this letter. But in smaller print, it says your mammogram is normal. My husband's like, oh, it says your mammogram is normal. And I said, well, that should be bolded. I was like, and he was like, aren't you a doctor? I was like, I stay in my lane. But right, so real world experiences about getting that information, and normal isn't always easy to see or to find, was what I walked away from. So just get your results. Know what was done to you, right? So people will say, oh, I had an ovary removed. Well, or I had a complete what? Did they take all of your uterus? Did they take all of the breast? Did they do a lumpectomy? Did they only take the cancer? Was it a biopsy? Did they leave a seed, right? Like, learn the lingo that pertains to your body and your cancer, because it is a journey. It's a journey, and you know you the best, and we know the cancer, and so together we should be meeting in the middle, and you're teaching me about you. You're telling me what's important to you. You're telling me your side effects. And then I'm telling you, this is what the chemo does. This is what surgery does. How tired should you be? And so, again, it's a relationship, and it needs to work for both of you.
We'd like to field some questions from the audience. If the audience has any questions for any of our panelists, please ask them now. Is this one?
So my name is TJ. I too am a cancer survivor, going on 7 years. There was a couple things that you had talked about like the disparities and stuff like that. And, unfortunately, so for me, I had cancer twice, a double mastectomy, 7 surgeries. My last surgery was last year. Like, on my first diagnosis, I experienced that. And I said to myself, I was like, I'm thinking to myself, like, am I in the twilight zone? I'm like, either you're going to help me or you're not. So my question is, during your journeys, at any given point during your treatment, did you feel like anybody a part of your teams, like, you experienced that disparity there at any given point? For both of you, either one of you.
Actually, I really didn't. And I think part of it is because I didn't allow myself to, because I wanted to know, and doggone it, they were going to tell me. Because I felt as though, because I teach, and if a child has a question, I have to do each and everything I can to see to it that they learn what I'm trying to teach them. So if they didn't learn it this way, then I got to teach it another way. And if they didn't learn it that way, then maybe there's another way. If I have to stand on my head for that baby to learn multiplication, then that's what I do. And I feel as though if that's what I have to do for a child to learn, then treat me like a child, and I'm going to ask you every question, and I expect an answer. And don't feel bad. Don't feel like you're being demanding, because you have a right to be. You can do it nicely, because, I mean, I'm the queen of Miss Nice Nasty, but you can. But it's okay. It's really okay to say, I want to know this, and if you can't tell me, you need to find me somebody who can. And it's not a problem, and you shouldn't feel bad about doing that. And I don't care how many degrees, and God bless you all for all your degrees, but I have a right to know, and everyone has a right to know, and you should feel that way.
You talked about disparity, okay? When you have a group of doctors that really care, show you how they feel about you, going to be there with you, explain everything to you. I didn't feel that way with the government. You know, being a veteran, and I can bring a bunch of veterans up here and let you know the same thing. They do not take you to the side and say, listen here, this is what's going to happen to you, this is how we're going to do this, this is what we expect from you. That never happened. That never happened. I said, well, why do I know what's going on? Why you can't tell me what's going on with me? When the surgery was over and I opened up my eyes, my wife was sitting there, and she said, well, what's going to happen with my husband? Why aren't you telling him this and this and that? Nobody told me anything. It just left me hanging. I had to depend on my Lord. You know, I couldn't depend on nobody else. I had to depend on my Lord and my wife. My wife loves to ask questions. She's the queen of questions, you know. She likes to ask questions, and if she can't find the answer, she'll keep on looking it up, you know. I'm blessed. I'm blessed to have someone that's going to help me get through this thing, because cancer is nothing to play with, you know. And like I said, I thought it was a death sentence. I'm going to die from cancer. I just lost my daughter. I just lost my brother. I'm next, you know. You have to know how I felt at that time. But up until today, I'm well.
Praise God.
You know?
We have another question from the audience.
Thank you. My name is Khali Maddox-Abdegeo, and we spoke about people communicating things to their relatives about what's going on. I tried for at least 5 years before my father passed to find out what was going on, what his problems were. And it was though I was walking through Serengeti, like, you know, with no weapons. I was amazed to find out all the things that was going on with him after he passed, especially about the cancer and a few other things. But I figured if my father had certain situations, then someone that's going to be passed on to me genetically, like, you know, etc. So how do you guys deal with that factor? Are there workshops, you know, to teach people, prospective patients, how to deal with this issue? Because I feel there should be some kind of a major a session, plenary session and whatnot, to make people feel at ease. And, you know, a lot of people feel as though if they reveal they got a certain ailment, that, you know, something's going to happen to them. I don't know where it come from, other than the plantation, like, you know, but I have no idea. Thank you.
Yeah, I can talk about people feeling the need to be stoic with their cancer diagnosis or their health in general. And I think it's more common among men. I think men are told, you know, you don't complain, you just keep doing. And it also comes from a place of not, you know, being afraid to get help, like not wanting to be dependent on anybody. You've always been the provider. And I tell my patients, you know, I think this is where really getting to know your patient helps and matters. Because often we've all had different jobs, we've done different things with your life. What has that person done? And usually they've taken care of someone else along their life. They were a firefighter, police officer, they were in healthcare. And they know what it's like to take care of other people. And they've put in all that work and done that time. So now it's kind of time for us to help them. So that's kind of framing that this is just part of the natural course, that, you know, they helped a lot of people, so now please let us help you, and try to break down those walls. It's not easy, and I think you brought up the point about how do you find out more about your family history. I think that's another, you know, reason to ask questions, but that's generally how I approach it. I don't know if others have thoughts or...
So I can share another perspective to this. So when somebody gets diagnosed with cancer, you know, a lot of cancer centers, including the one at Baystate, has social workers who are also available. So these social workers are able to provide a lot of resources on how to disclose information that you have cancer. This is a very common question that I get asked by young women who've been diagnosed with cancer. How do I tell my children? Like, you know, when my child sees that I'm losing hair after chemotherapy, like, you know, how are they going to process it? What do I tell them? So they do have a lot of resources. They can provide videos, things like that. if not necessarily workshops, certainly resources are available which can direct you in terms of how to disclose information to family members. And I'm also going to urge each of you to, as much as possible, disclose this information with your family members, your children, pass it forward. You might not have had the same experience with getting information from your family members, but if you are able to proactively do that, it'll allow your next generation to be more proactive about their health as well. And I'm also just going to add that, so specifically for breast cancer, there is the Rays of Hope Foundation, which is closely affiliated with Baystate. They have a ton of resources available for, not just in terms of how to disclose information about this, but really, through survivorship care as well. They give you information on what kind of exercises, activities you can do, all kinds of things. So certainly there are these support groups that you can certainly look into as well.
From our online audience, Prachi.
Hi. There's a question in the chat that's saying, so how do you make sure you are getting the best aftercare?
Did you hear that?
How do you make sure you're getting the best aftercare?
It's just, so how do you make sure you are getting the best aftercare?
So specifically, there are, again, I can talk a little bit more about breast cancer because that's predominantly what I focus on. So we have a survivorship care clinic. We make sure that we follow people even after they've completed treatment for their cancer, their hormone treatment or chemotherapy. So up until the 5-year mark, typically they're followed by the doctors and their team. But after that, we have a survivorship care clinic that specifically focuses on managing long-term effects of being on hormone treatment or long-term effects of being on chemotherapy or things like bone health, etc., which are important components of breast cancer. So, you still have your annual visits with our survivorship care clinic. And I think this is something that people are starting to recognize now a little bit more, that there are long-term, consequences of receiving some of the treatments that we provide. And so there's certainly more of a focus on survivorship care. And I think multiple, hospitals across the country are now starting to focus a little bit more on what are the tests that people need in the future. If they received a certain type of chemotherapy, should they need an echocardiogram or a heart ultrasound to make sure that they don't, have, long-term consequences of having some of these treatments. So certainly, make sure that you ask and find out if, there is a survivorship care clinic that's available, or what do I need to be doing moving forward. And PCPs, primary cares, are also in tune with knowing what needs to be done. And often it's important for a medical oncologist to kind of pass on that message once there's a transition of care.
Also, most cancers have standard post-treatment guidelines that you can look up. And so you can look up, type your cancer, survivorship, follow-up, print it, bring it to your doctor. Say, like, is this going to be my surveillance plan? Is this going to be my schedule?
And I can add, related to this, is getting involved in research studies or clinical trials. So often, populations from racial and ethnic backgrounds are underrepresented in studies and trials. And the reason is often they don't know about it. No one told them. So it's important, and a lot of these, medicine is always evolving and is always getting better. So some of these may actually help you. And so asking your doctor, hey, do I qualify for any clinical trials? Going on, like I said, the survivorship and the advocacy groups, they often know about the clinical trials. Becoming part of those groups and thinking, okay, is there anything that's, the group thinks that has been helpful or know that's been helpful for other people? So getting that information can only help you get the best aftercare.
Sorry, he said my candy word, which is clinical trials. So just one thing about clinical trials. So the myth is that we, as people of color, wouldn't go on a trial if we were asked because we have trust issues. It's actually not true. So yes, there are trust issues. Yes, there is historical things that have been done that are horrific in this country. But the reason why we're not represented is because we're not asked. You have to be invited to participate in a clinical trial, and that invitation is not getting extended because implicit bias. People are making judgments. People are saying that's not going to be a good, before you even walk in the door, you've been uninvited. And so when you're diagnosed with cancer, you should be asking, what's the standard of care, right? So what did you learn in school? What should we be doing? And what's new and upcoming? And is there a clinical trial I'm eligible for, right? Those are like your top 3 questions. So sorry, you brought up clinical trials and got me all on fire. And the reason why it's important is because when the drug gets approved, if there were 90%, I only take care of women, 90% white women, how do we know how that drug works in you? Because we're all different, and we're acknowledging that our biologies are different. And so I want to say, people just like you, with your stage of cancer, are on this study. We know how it's going to affect you, and we know it's going to benefit you.
Kimothy, I'm just going to add one comment that Dr. Myers actually mentioned last year, which really stuck with me, which is that, if people of color do not participate in clinical trials, they're getting left behind. So we don't know what kind of, effects some of the treatments that we give have on them. So it's really important to, join the party and make sure that, your representation is there as well.
There was,
So, I think I'm next, right?
Yes, this has to be
so
the
my
last question.
So my question is, I hear you saying, and I appreciate everything. This has been fabulous. A lot of things that I didn't know. I hear you saying, ask the question. But you, being a teacher, you knew what the question was to ask, Robin. For those of us who are probably steamrolled hearing that cancer word, what are the questions, baseline questions that we should ask to get the conversation started? You'd hit upon it on the 3 questions that we should go to. That's great. But just as a rule, across the board, what should we hear that, and what are the questions that we should ask? Because we might not know what to ask. We don't know what we don't know.
I'll just start it. What type of cancer do I have? So for me, it's sometimes confusing for people in the GYN. Where did it start? Is it cervical? Is it endometrial? Is it my ovary? What is the type? So where did it start and what is the type? Because there are different types that can happen in any one organ. And then what is the stage? Stage tells us where in the body is it spread, and if you don't know the stage, how are you going to determine that? Sometimes it's through imaging. And this is where having your person is important. So, and people say, oh, well, such and such lives in Kansas. It's America. You can call anywhere. We can call, video, text, have somebody, a second set of ears available, and come prepared. Please do not come into those appointments to get biopsy results without the knowledge that this could possibly be cancer, right? And so what type is it? Where did it start? What is the stage? How is it treated? Is it treatable? If you want to know. Not everybody wants to know all of that information. And get things in writing. Because no matter what we say, statistically, you're going to leave with 30% of it. So having a piece of paper with the printout, what is it? Knowing that your name's at the top of that page, right? That it's your date of birth. Yep, that was your biopsy on the day you had it. Yep, it's you. And then you go back and you begin to break down that information.
don't think I have anything much more to add, but yeah, I think, it's amazing how many people who have a diagnosis of cancer don't know the stage of their cancer. So it's really important for you to know that, because that also dictates treatment. And like Dr. Myers mentioned, whether it's treatable, and if it's treatable, can it be cured, or are we just trying to control the cancer? So this is important information. And actually, if you just Google what are some of the important questions to ask at your first cancer visit, you have multiple websites which actually give you a list of questions. So make sure that you get a printout of that and ask some of those basic questions. The American Society of Clinical Oncology has a patient information related website. It's called cancer.net. And that gives you information on what are the questions that you want to ask. It gives you some information, patient-related, patient-friendly information on statistics. What are the treatment options available? Not so much medical jargon, but really trying to lay it out for everyone else to be able to read it.
Can we please give our panelists a round of applause? This has been fantastic information sharing. Our time really has run over slightly, but I hope it was worthwhile. And now we are at the point of our program where we're going to unveil the portraits of our honorees for the 2024 Faces of Faith. So I would like to call up Miss Janet Nazario. She was recognized and honored in 2022. And filling in for Miss Darlene Francis, who was a 2023 honoree, is Martha Anderson.
Good evening. We got all these papers. What am I missing? Thank you. It's for us petite people, we have to lower the mic. And I will start with the first one. And it reads, "Keep the faith. My faith was all that I had to help me through my lung cancer journey. My faith gave me strength. My faith gave me courage." Psalms 23:6 reminded me that even when my life has run its course, and it will, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And hearing my Father in heaven say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant," is worth keeping my faith. By Mr. William Brown.
God's grace is sufficient. 2 Corinthians 12:9. I was notified over the phone the day before Thanksgiving that I had cancer. I repeated the words ductal carcinoma in situ in a mixed tone of mocking disbelief. I wanted to check my ears. I know this man didn't just say I had cancer, but he did, and I knew I had to deal with it. My family immediately rallied around me. By God's grace and my family, I pulled through the lumpectomy. 9 years later, another spot was discovered during my annual mammogram, and this time, the diagnosis was shared face to face. Prior to this doctor's visit, I asked God to give me clarity of thought and a peaceful spirit, and he did. This time, it was the other breast and a different type of cancer. I did not want this nonsense to define me and didn't want it to do this again in another 9 years. So I opted to have a double mastectomy. Throughout my 14-hour surgery, Jesus rallied the prayer warriors, my husband, my children, all of my sisters, my church family, and pastor. They were there. Lord, I didn't know what to expect, but I look who you placed in my life to pull me through. Thank you, God, for my family. To anyone confronted with a serious illness, I leave you with this verse. And he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made in perfect weakness. Therefore, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Robin Fowlkes.
What a mighty God we serve. Who would have thought 8 years ago I would be diagnosed with lung cancer? I fell, and my primary care physician ordered an x-ray, at which time a spot on my lung was observed. I was referred to a pulmonologist who ordered another chest x-ray and continued to monitor the spot on my left lung every 3 to 4 months for a year. One day, I received a call stating, I need to make an appointment as soon as possible. Fear took over, and I felt helpless at that moment. I called on God and asked him for strength and remembered that I am his child. So why am I worrying? I met with the pulmonologist who informed me that the spot had grown and a biopsy was needed to determine if it was cancerous. If during the biopsy determined it's cancerous, we'll remove the lobe. My surgery was booked, and the surgeon reviewed the process again to make sure I understood what would happen. I agreed. I asked God to be with the surgeons. When I woke up, I was told it was cancerous, but because it had not spread, the other lobes were saved. I did not require any chemotherapy, radiation, or medications. I am so thankful for God's blessings and healing on my life. Joyce Huff.
Prayer changes things. As a woman of faith, I am confident that it was my strong faith that enabled me to face my breast cancer journey confidently, without fear. The day before my surgery, my pastor led my trusted group of family and friends in a prayer circle, asking God for restorative healing, and claimed victory after my medical procedures. Throughout my year-long journey, I did not suffer. No pain, no sickness. Went to work every day and resumed all of my regular activities 2 weeks after the surgery. I knew that my prayers had been answered and that my blessing, confirmation for me, that prayer changes things. Denise Jordan.
This is supposed to get easier, but it's harder when you read this. But I love this one. God showed up and showed out. Amen. If it had not been for the Lord on my side, where would I be? Where would I be? In 1999, within a 3-week span, my father passed away, my mother got sick and passed away, and then at the age of 61, I was diagnosed with colon cancer. My doctor recommended that I have surgery immediately, and said I couldn't travel to my mother's funeral due to my diagnosis. I had no money to travel. It looked like in 1999 I had nothing but trouble, but God brought me through. The Lord made a way out of no way and blessed me by providing 2 round-trip plane tickets through a lady my aunt worked with at Mass Mutual. In 2009, at the age of 71, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. God showed up and showed out again. God has brought me a mighty long way, and I love him. God has blessed me and is still blessing me today at the age of 86 years young. And I tell you, I thank him every day. Amen. Miss Vivian Moulden.
Fear nothing and no one but Allah. Growing up, I never heard my father or other family members mention the C word. In 2010, I learned that my father had been battling prostate cancer for 10 years. He ignored pleas from his physicians to get the proper treatment early on due to his fear of being victimized, like the black men in the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. My father died in 2012. I swore to myself that if I developed prostate cancer, I would not hesitate to immediately seek the best possible treatment available. In 2021, my urologist in Springfield, Massachusetts, performed a biopsy, which revealed early-stage prostate cancer. I was suddenly confronted with the limitation of my immortality. I was scared out of my wits as I imagined the worst. However, I remembered that my spiritual faith had emphasized to me that I should fear nothing and no one but Allah. I prayed that the Damore Cancer Center doctors in Springfield knew what they were doing, and therefore I should not worry. My faith in Allah and in the Damore Cancer Center helped me to overcome the fear that my father had experienced during his bout with prostate cancer. Khali Maddox-Abdegeo.
Blessed and highly favored. Breast cancer was prevalent in our family. Every year I would get a mammogram because of my family history. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in November of 2009. Because I got a mammogram each year, my breast cancer was detected in an early stage. Out of 7 girls, I was the closest to my mom. My mom had breast cancer, and that hit hard, from which, through care and treatment, she survived. My thought was I would be the one following in my mom's footsteps. However, I believe that everything happens for a reason. I was equipped for a struggle, having supported her along the way. I believe that my faith in God, the love and the support of family and friends made it easier to get through the chapter of my life. I am blessed and highly favored, for I have seen the goodness of the Lord. As I move towards my 15th year as cancer survivor, Ms. Sandra Moultrie.
God is good. All the time. And all the time.
God is good.
In June 2016, while completing a head-to-toe body and skin check, I found a lump under my left ear, which was barely noticeable. I thought it was a blocked duct. I had my dentist look at it during my regular dental exam. The x-rays were normal, but my dentist recommended I follow up with my primary care physician. My physician also thought it might be a blocked duct, but out of precaution referred me to an ear, nose, and throat, ENT, specialist. One morning in July 2016, as I put makeup on, the Lord showed me the word cancer in the mirror. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and said, okay, and I'll not fixate on what's unknown. You're leading. A few weeks later, I had an ENT exam. At the follow-up, it was confirmed that God had already revealed to me what I saw and knew in the mirror. I was diagnosed with myoepithelial cancer of the parotid. Stage 3, a head and neck cancer. The surgery was in September, followed by chemotherapy and radiation. A year later, I learned that it had advanced to stage 4, requiring more chemotherapy and more radiation. Although I suffer from irreparable damage and chronic pain, God never leaves. God always leads. God uses my cancer story to share his word. Irvinia-Scott Robbins.
God was with me. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I was entirely unprepared for the shock of the diagnosis. My heart raced, the tears streamed down my face, and because of the pandemic, my kids were not able to be with me when I got the news. I thought that I was all alone, but God was with me. Following chemotherapy and a double mastectomy, I started radiation therapy, reconstruction surgery. I was drained physically, financially, and mentally. At times, I wanted to give up. Then I remembered that God didn't bring me this far for me to give up now. Going through cancer and its treatment has changed me forever. The disease gave me a better perspective on what's more important and what's not. Never again will I be a victim of circumstance. Instead, I will choose to have hope, have faith, and seek support. I will continue to build my relationship with God and also with my loved ones. Ms. Dixie Rodriguez.
I believe in a higher power. I am not a very religious person, but I am spiritual, and I do believe in a higher power. Looking back at when I heard the diagnosis of lung cancer, I realized that faith in the outcome consistent with the faith in a guiding hand lent a certain calmness and a tranquility about the outcome. It was what God wanted, and that was okay with me. Andrew Rucks, MD.
My grandmother's wisdom. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I leaned on my faith from the Lord, asked for his help and direction through chemo and radiation treatments. I relied on the medical knowledge of my doctors, who prescribed the best treatment plan for me. I did not listen to what people were saying because I thought it would just interfere with my conversation with the Lord. I remember my grandma who said, "When you turn something over to the Lord, let him take care of it. If you're still working it, you'll make a mess." My grandmother's wise advice has always held true. Miss Deborah Scott.
To God be the glory. Amen. Faith has been part of my cancer journey since the beginning. I grew up in faith, but it became stronger when I got sick. I learned how important faith is and how having a relationship with God can bring me through anything. I kept asking God, why me? What did I do? I believe God has answered that question for me clearly now. God wants me to be here for a reason. He wants me to share my testimony. A double mastectomy and 7 surgeries, here I stand, 7 years since my last diagnosis. And I know I got through because of my faith. To God be the glory. Taijhia T.J. Steele.
Bless you all.
Thank you to all of you for participating in this year's 2024 Faces of Faith. And I'm going to now invite Anna Marie Golden, Director of Baystate Health, Government and Community Relations, to the podium, please.
Good evening. Thank you. I have the honor of extending appreciation, acknowledgments, and thank yous. So a general thank you to everyone that is here this evening, those that are here in studio, and those of you that are online. Thank you to all of our honorees for sharing your stories. Very powerful. Thank you to our collaborators. We've mentioned them before, but I want to say them again. The Center for Community Health Equity and Research at UMass, Dana-Farber Harvard Cancer Center, and the Center for Cancer Equity and Engagement, the Faith-Based Health Alliance here in Springfield, Focus Springfield, our host this evening, and the City of Springfield's Health and Human Services Department, Office of Health and Racial Equity. Our wonderful panelists tonight, round of applause. Dr. Tashana Myers, our moderator, excellent job. Dr. Eduardo Nunez, and Dr. Prarthna Bardwaj. And to our amazing storytellers. Thank you. William Brown and Robin Fowlkes. And that photography of our honorees. Thank you, Denise Jordan. And then none of this would happen without the wonderful leadership of Timothy Jones. And an amazing planning team of which I got to serve along with some amazing folks, including Prachi Patel and Jenny Bedford, Janet Nazario, Brenda Evans, Darlene Francis, Denise Stewart, Vicki Frisbee, Chris Marie Gonzalez, Reverend Marcus McCullough, Martha Anderson. Thank you to each of you for your time. And just a friendly reminder, each of you have a folder at your seat. Before you leave, we invite you to complete a survey that you will find in your folder. And there's also a pen in there for you. So we would love to hear from you how you thought tonight's event went and how we can continue to make it better for many years to come. Thank you.
And as we began, so shall we end. Closing prayer. Reverend Uta Smith, Manager, Baystate Health, Spiritual Services and Education.
Hello, everybody. Oh, what an evening. Praise the Lord. Whoa. We should sing. I'm not going to do that. Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for being here. And Timothy asked me to bring some musical instrument. It's a meditation bell that I will ring in a moment. But full disclosure, I had a birthday a few weeks ago, and I celebrated, among other things, by going to the Breast and Wellness Center and get a mammogram. And it was a good experience. And I got that report, and I don't understand it. So thank you for mentioning that. And I also want to say thank you to the community member here who lifted up the difficulty of asking questions. I Googled some medical questions today, too, that I didn't know how to ask. I just thought that was very powerful that you mentioned that. On that note, let us be together and listen to the bell to center us, to go to that place inside our hearts that speaks of gratitude and appreciation and life. O Holy One of blessing, God, creator of love and community of life, of resilience, of courage and joy and strength. Our hearts are full tonight, and we give thanks that you've gathered us here in this circle of care, this circle of compassion and love. For you, O God, have called us to be not lonesome, but to be together with one another, and to tell our stories, to make sense of what it means to be human, of what it means to be a survivor of cancer, and what it means to live with hope and with fear and with questions and with everything in between, and living in the mystery and not knowing, and yet being able to reach out tonight and to learn. God, we give thanks for our inquisitive minds who want to learn, and for those who have wisdom and skill and the ability to articulate complex things so that they make sense to each one of us. We give thanks for this spirit of encouragement tonight. We give thanks for this space that held our joy, our gratitude, as much as our fears and our questions, our despair. We give thanks that this space is safe enough for us to gather. And we give thanks that you gathered us to go forth from this place knowing that we can come back to our doctors, to our survivors, to the storytellers, to anyone in this community, knowing that we are not alone. And as I'm praying this, oh God, yes, help each one of us to feel that we are not alone. Help us to trust, first of all, your guidance, oh God. But sometimes it's perhaps easier to trust your guidance than to trust the doctor's guidance. So help us. Help us in our moments of uncertainty to gain that little bit of courage to reach out to our neighbor, to a friend, to a family, to talk about what we may fear when we hear the big C word. Give us courage. And love for one another. So with these words, oh God, I ask that you may bless us as we go out into this night, into this evening. Bless us with your grace and your generous, abundant love that touches each one of us. O God of many names, of many colors, of many meanings, be with us tonight as we celebrate the stories who become sacred in your book. Help us to remember those sacred stories of our survivors, of our doctors, of each one in this room. And let us share them with others. Bless us with compassion, courage, and the never-ending will to live good and fulfilling, just lives. O Lord, we pray for peace as we go out into the night. And help us to remember all those memories of those who went before us, whose lives, whose cancer journeys ended early, and still their memories are a blessing to us. And the people of God say, Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Join us for some light refreshments. Yes.